Three, two, one.
Good afternoon. On behalf of the trustees and staff of the American Board of Urology and my colleague Doug Huseman, I'm Roger Demikowski, and I'd like to welcome you to the next in a sequence of town halls that we've had over the year in response to the pandemic. We have the next slide, please. The ABU has been very active in terms of responding to the issues associated with the pandemic, and I think you'll hear some very good news in terms of some adaptability on the part of the ABU. We also wanted to update you on several other things that we're doing. So David Joseph will begin with the continuing urologic certification pilot. He'll be followed by Gary Lamack, who will talk about some changes related to the certifying exam that will be taking place a little bit later this year. That'll be followed by Doug Huseman talking about ABU efforts related to diversity. Martha Terrace and Cheryl Lee will also comment on those as well. And then finally, we'll have an open session for forum for questions that have been submitted. We'll try to get to as many of those as possible, and we'll commit to getting back to you with any that we don't have time for. We really appreciate your time and interest in spending an hour of your lives with us. We had over 900 people view our last town hall, so we do think that this is helpful, especially as there are some ongoing, if you will, late-breaking things that are developing. Without any further ado, I'll pass over to Dr. David Joseph, who is our immediate past president, to talk about some changes in continuing urologic certification. David?
Thank you, Roger. If I can have the first slide. This is certainly an exciting time where we've really literally gone from vision to rollout. And there's many people to thank for that. I think first is Lindsay and her staff in the office, who've really put together a great effort to get us to this point, and they know that they have a lot of work coming up in the future. All of the trustees have participated in this pilot project, but certainly the leadership of Dr. Demikowski and Thrasher have been very critical. But equally important is all of you who have participated in the past town halls, AUA section meetings. All of your comments have really laid the foundation for much of what we're going to talk about today. Next slide. So first is the rationale for making any change, or the rationale for continuing certification. The issue of continuing certification isn't going to go away, but the process is going to change over time, just like everything evolves. We have changing goals, we have changing educational opportunities. We need to align better with some of the standards that are set forth to us by the ABMS regarding creating a continuous formative learning opportunity. We need to make a change between the time of summative decisions, meaning determining who's qualified really to practice urology. Everyone realizes how much urology changes over a period of time, and waiting for a 10-year cycle is not practical. But most important is what I said earlier, is we need to really present a product that better fits your type of practice and relieves some of the burden you have been under. We've taken that into consideration. We've created a program that you'll be able to perform in a home environment using your own computer, time unlimited, open resources, and we it's hoped that this will provide less disruption, not only to your practice, but lifestyle. Next slide. So there's a very important question that comes up. I think everybody appreciates that initially becoming certified is important, but what about continuing certification? Is it really necessary? Do you need to do it? And what's the benefit? Well, there is strong evidence to show that there is a difference between those physicians who continue with certification and who are not certified, particularly when you look at the attributes of what's called judgment, knowledge, and skills. It's recognized that those three attributes do decline over time. And what's also appreciated is you cannot assess your own competence. In a sense, you don't know what you don't know. And so it's important to continue on some type of educational process. As I mentioned, urology, particularly urology, has advanced exponentially over the past several years. And unless you stay in contact with what's going on, you do lose that. In 2018, there was a very important study, a survey that was conducted by the University of Chicago, and they elicited responses broadly from the country, around 2,000 individuals, to ask them what board certification meant. And in greater than 95%, those individuals selected their physician based on board certification and continued certification. Within that group, 98% felt that continued certification represented that their physicians were up to date with the medical knowledge that they needed. And it really is a picture for increasing public trust. Next slide. There's also evidence to show that if you're continually exposed to some type of testing process, it will enhance your learning. And this testing process is best if it's low stakes and provides some type of memory challenge, which is just really a brain exercise. It embeds learning much greater than what we currently do, in a sense, with our binge and purge 10-year point in time exam. Everyone who's taken that exam studies aggressively for 6 to 8 weeks up to the exam. And I can tell you that as soon as you leave that exam, your knowledge begins to decay. And it's really important that you maintain that knowledge and that you're exposed to new concepts. There's also strong evidence to show that your performance in doing this predicts your clinical ability, and it improves your patient management and outcome. It also reduces your exposure to disciplinary action. Next slide. So we're part of the ABMS, and the ABMS really aligns 24 boards with common standards, and we have to adhere to those common standards. But what's important is the 24 boards are not all alike, and there is some flexibility. And what we do as a board isn't necessarily identical to what another board will be doing. And what I wanted to review with you is what we're currently doing, some of the flexibility we've had, and how we're going to use that moving forward. Next slide. This is what we call the portfolio of required activities, and it's what currently everyone is exposed to. I think everybody appreciates we have 2 levels. Level 1 is years 1 through 5, level 2, 6 through 10. And what you have listed here in the components on the left-hand side are all the activities that we require that you fulfill moving forward. And the X box just shows where those activities align in each level. We are not changing any of these requirements with the exception of the bottom row where you see the knowledge assessment 10-year exam. That's what's being replaced with the continuing urologic certification. What I've highlighted in red is very important factors and really sets us apart from many of the other boards. Most other boards determine whether somebody continues with certification based solely on their performance on an exam. We don't do that. Next slide. We make a summative decision whether you're able to continue with your certification based on 4 components. The 10-year exam is important, but it's only one component. Equally important are the complication and mortality narratives that you present, the practice log that you work on, and your peer review. And it's this group of characteristics that we use to make our decision. Next slide. What we're changing is that 10-year point in time exam. And that's what incorporates into our what we call CUC, Continuing Urologic Certification Pilot. Next slide. So the pilot is going to be based on a 5-year cycle. And there's 3 formative components that go into the cycle. And I'm going to go into each one of these in more detail in just a few minutes. But it's made up of what's called knowledge reinforcement, and that's the memory challenge. And you'll be undertaking that in years 1 and 3. A knowledge exposure, which is new concepts through years 2 and 4. And this will be with journal articles. And then in the 5th year will be a knowledge assessment. And this is where we identify how well individuals are doing, and particularly looking for potential gaps in their knowledge. Now, those potential gaps don't result in loss of certificate, but allows us to direct you into areas of CME activities that could support and improve your knowledge. Next slide. So this is what the new portfolio will look like, and it's a pretty busy slide, but if you first concentrate on columns A and B, these are the activities that we currently have in level 1 and 2. Nothing has been added. What we've done, though, is defined and described each activity in a certain year. And the reason for doing that is what we found is most diplomats will wait until the very end of their level cycle and then try to do all activities at one time. And we felt that by distributing it through the 5-year cycle, we'll just make it a more even paced and lessen some of the burden on you. Now, if you look at the left column, that's the CUC activity, and that's what's replacing the current 10-year secure exam. So the first year you'll do knowledge reinforcement with the 40 questions. Second year, knowledge exposure, 8 articles. Third year, again, reinforcement, 40 questions. Fourth year, 8 articles. And you'll see in each one of those areas that we've identified a threshold of knowledge. And the reason we've done that is if you exceed that threshold of knowledge, you will be excused from the 5th year knowledge assessment exam. Now we know that as time goes on, we are going to modify our thresholds based on the results and performance of all diplomats. So that'll change in the future. But for those individuals taking the knowledge assessment in the 5th year, it'll be 90 questions, very similar to what you currently do on the 10-year exam, but again, in your own environment. Next slide. We've maintained the modular concept that you're all familiar with. So when you enter this program, you will identify a module that you feel best supports your practice. In the past, we've had a module, the 4th module on neurourology and female pelvic medicine, and that's transitioned to a general office-based urology practice. We realize that even when you select one of these, that it's not going to be a perfect match for your practice, but we found in the past that it does support what most diplomats are doing. Next slide. So in more detail, the knowledge reinforcement, the memory challenge. It's going to be 40 questions years 1 and 3. You do it on your own computer. The questions are going to come 20 from what's considered core urology, basic urology, and 20 questions directly from a selected module. We're going to have a window where you can begin this process, and it's going to open in April and close the end of July. Once you start the process, you'll have 6 weeks to complete it. It's completely self-paced. It's established so you can choose to do 1 question a day, or you could actually do all questions at one time. From an education point of view, you're probably better off if you spaced it out and did 1 question a day, but that's completely your decision. There's no time limit on the question. The questions are clinical judgment and problem solving, and we encourage you to take time and assess the questions and look it up. It's open resource, meaning you are allowed to use any resource you normally would use in your clinical practice. Textbooks, journal articles, looking something up on the internet. The only thing you are excluded from doing is discussing any question with another diplomat or one of your partners. And as I had mentioned, we have a completion goal of 60% correct. Next slide. This just shows the screen that you'll see on your computer. It's pretty standard. There's a stem which describes the question and all the answers. You'll hit a question, you'll hit a response. Next slide. And it'll tell you if you're correct. If it's green, that means you were correct. If it's red, you were incorrect. The answer will be discussed in a paragraph below. And then following that, there'll be further areas where you can identify more resources to look this up further. You do need to answer the question before you move on to the next one. Now you could start a question and merely stop and return to it the next day, and that's fine. But in order to progress, you have to complete the question. And once you've completed the question, you will not go back to it. Next slide. And the next year's the knowledge exposure is based on new concepts. And this is created in partnership with the AUA, and it's going to be delivered through the AUA University. And within the university, they're going to create a library in a sense that's going to have sections that correspond to core urology, guidelines in urology, and then the 4 modules that you can select. You will be required to do 4 articles that come from the core or guidelines, and then 4 articles that come from the modules. Now you could select all 4 articles from your particular module, but let's say if you've identified office-based practice as your testing module, and you see an article in oncology that you feel would fit your practice, you're certainly allowed to review that. The articles are going to remain current and will turn over in a period of time, again, based on the work of the AUA. We do have a completion goal here of 80%. It's different than the questions, primarily because it's different type of questions, number one, but by completing this and achieving a goal of 80%, you will be credited, you will be provided CME credit. Next slide. The knowledge assessment, which is the test performance, is going to be very similar to what you're familiar with now, the 10-year point-in-time exam. It's 90 questions, 45 core, 45 module, and will not time unrestricted or time unlimited. You will have a full day to do it. And we know from past history of individuals who have taken the 10-year point-in-time exam in a secure environment, most of them complete the exam within 2.5 hours. Once again, it's open resource without the ability to discuss with others. You do it in your home. For individuals who are approaching our knowledge threshold, you will be assigned various CME credits in any area where you may show a gap in knowledge. And again, what's important is this activity will be waived as long as you maintain an average in the continuous learning above 60% and on the journal articles above 80%. Next slide. So in order to remain certified, you do have to complete the other activities, not just the CUC, as I mentioned. You'll have all the other activities in the portfolio. You'll need to do the peer review, your complication mortality narratives, and your practice log. But what I want to stress is our exam is not high stakes. It's not pass-fail. It's simply a knowledge assessment tool. Next slide. The incentive for participating in the pilot allows those individuals to be waived from the 10-year secure exam that will be upcoming. They will also be provided with CME credit for the AUA University. And in addition, we're providing a one-time reduction in your CME requirements. I think all of you know that at the very end of certification, you need 90 CME urology focused hours in the last 3 years, and we're reducing that to 70 hours if you participate in the pilot. Next slide. Well, the pilot was recently announced to all diplomats in good standing in years 6, 7, and 8. The participation is completely voluntary. During the pilot, we are going to continue to offer the 10-year point-in-time exam for someone who just wants to complete that. We have limited the number of participants to 500, and this is 500 a year. And as a pilot, we recognize there's going to be several aspects of the program that are going to need to be changed over time. That's the reason for a pilot. And basically, the diplomat volunteers are beta testers in a sense. And based on their feedback, will be the direction that we move in the future. But right out of the box, we realized that we did make a critical error in a sense. Next slide. And we underestimated the overwhelming enthusiasm for participating in the pilot. Within 12 hours of announcing the pilot, we had over 500 individuals that accepted it. And within 1 day, we approached 700. And we realized that just doing this on a first come, first served basis, which is what we described, would not be fair to those individuals in years 7 and 8 who are really nearing the end of their cycle and may not have the opportunity to participate again in the future. So what we did, and some of you probably realize that, is we sent notes to all of those individuals in year 6 that we were holding off on their enrollment. There's really no ill effect on those individuals in that it just provides them an off year. We are providing this again in 2022, and we will be giving priority to anyone we turned away of the 6s that we turned away this year who want to participate next year. Next slide. So for those of you who want further information, I encourage you to go to the ABU website. And if you click down on the link of lifelong learning and go down to the bottom, you'll see continuing neurologic certification and the CUC frequently asked questions. And hopefully that will help provide you with more detail. Next slide. We were going to have questions here, but due to time constraints, we're going to hold those to the end. And I'll turn this over to Dr. Gary Lemack, who is chair of the oral exam committee. Thank you.
Thanks very much, David. Appreciate that and appreciate the review. As David mentioned, I'm the chair of the oral exam committee. As you may have already recognized, we have made some changes this year with the format of the certifying examination. Our number one goal in doing the examination, of course, is to provide a safe, reliable, secure examination. And in looking at this, as it has been done in the past several years, as you all know, in Dallas, in a face-to-face examination, and putting a bunch of people together, it just became very clear over time that that was just not going to work in the current environment. Again, our number one goal is safety, and it's clear that not everyone will be immunized. And for the safety of our examiners, our examinees, and our staff, it became apparent that that model simply was not going to work this year. So the good news is for the last 6 months, we've been looking into this very closely, the possibility of doing a virtual examination, an online examination. And many member boards actually have already done this, and we've learned from their experiences and have been in touch with them about their experiences. And while it's not foolproof, we feel very confident at this time that we can deliver a virtual examination for all our candidates who are wishing to take the exam in 2021. It should be noted that the format of the examination will really not change. People should prepare the same way they've prepared in the past for this examination for the protocols that we've done in the past. So I don't anticipate anybody having to prepare any differently than they've done before. The board will be in touch with you well beforehand to make sure that you have the bandwidth, to make sure your connectivity is adequate, to give you instructions about how to make this a successful exam. So rest assured that we will be doing that. Another change that will happen this year is each examinee will have a one-day exam. So they'll be examined in the morning, they'll have lunch, and then they'll be examined again in the afternoon. The date and time of your examination will be given to you by the board well ahead of time. So you will know that. And we will take time zones into consideration. We realize that people from all over the country, of course, will be taking this examination. The last thing to note is we did change the date of the examination. We had a little bit more flexibility now, so we've moved it away from Mother's Day weekend to May 21st and 22nd. Those are the days for the current exam in 2021. And again, the board will be in touch with you with regard to your specific date and time and full instructions on how we're going to go about doing this. So we will get in touch with you. We will check your individual connectivity. We will make sure everything is perfectly lined up as best as it can be before that examination. So a lot of thought and preparation has gone into this. Many member boards have gone through this. We're confident we can deliver a safe, a reliable exam, and we expect you to prepare exactly as you've prepared in the past. With that, I think I'll turn it over now to Doug Huseman, and we certainly will entertain questions about the virtual examination after the completion of Doug's talk. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Lemack. So I'd like to thank Dr. Terrace and Dr. Lee.
The Board of Urology desires to clarify the diversity and inclusion has been a cornerstone of our values for years. We do, however, recognize that although we have made progress towards some of our long-term goals, we acknowledge that there is more to be done. Lindsay, next slide. We stand by the American Board of Medical Specialties statement on diversity that is depicted here on this slide. We firmly believe that as a healthcare community, we must stand against all forms of discrimination and intolerance. We're committed to working together to bring about fair and equal access to healthcare resources and to establish a system that supports our communities, regardless of their race, religion, or sexual orientation. Most diplomats do not know how an ABU committee appointment comes about. But specifically, when we're looking for an individual to be selected as a trustee or on the written or examining committee, the first thing we do is look at the applicant's capabilities. Specifically, we look to see, are they board certified? Have they documented expertise in their fields? Do they complete projects on time, which is extremely critical for serving on one of our committees? We have personality traits that will let them be effective. Do they have experience in leadership roles? And this final bullet point, do they have the time to commit? Depending upon which committee you may be asked to serve on, time commitments may be between 100 to 140 hours in a year, and this is not remunerated. Next, please. So before anybody is selected, we do a gap analysis of the committee. And specifically in this gap analysis, we're trying to get all AUA sections to be represented on one of the ABU committees. We look at their subspecialty expertise. We also look at do they come from different institutions, even including where did they train? What fellowships did they take? Is this different from current members on the committee? Does the committee vary in gender? Does the committee vary in race? Next, please. So what we try to do here is match the ABU committee to the makeup of the current AUA census. And the data we're going to show you next is what we obtained when we did our last analysis, when we made our nominations to the 2021 committees. Specifically, we're going to review the gender, geography, and race results. Next, please. So you can see that this slide depicts the ABU committee structures in 2020 when we made our selections compared to the 2019 AUA census. Next, please. This slide also depicts the ABA-UA committee composition compared to percent of urologists practicing in the section. We are usually either even with or within 3 to 4 percentage points different from the number of practicing physicians in that section. Next, please. Regarding race, you can see that the AUA census data is on the far column in 2019, and you can see the composition of the current ABU committees. Next, please. So our long-term objective is that our certification, supervision, or membership is equitably applied regardless of geography, gender, sexual orientation, ethnicity, or religious beliefs. It is our firm belief that all individuals need to be on an equal footing, embraced and respected as peers. Next. We must focus our efforts on educating our membership regarding the benefits of diversity. We need to understand the concept of unconscious bias. We have initiated implicit bias training for the diplomats, for the trustees, but will be completing a bias training for all the ABUA committees in the near future. Next. Dr. Lee is going to comment on this. We're going to voluntarily try to capture the race and ethnicity data on all applicants for certification. We've been asked to see if there is any bias in our qualifying or certifying examination items. We are unable to determine that without having this data available to us. Next, please. We're also working for a family leave policy. As you can see from the multiple icons on this slide, we were working with a variety of societies to formalize a policy regarding family leave. We hope that this will be finalized in the summer of 2021. Next, please. It should be noted that equity and inclusion that is found within any governing board is a perpetual task. This is not a one and done situation here. This needs to be incessantly evaluated and altered to reflect the current values and mores of the public we serve and the individuals we govern. Next, please. We welcome and encourage open and frank discussions as we strive to achieve our goals in meeting equity and inclusion within the committees of the Board of Urology. Thank you. Dr. Terrace, I believe, any comments?
Yeah, thanks, Doug. That was a great presentation. I just wanted to emphasize to the listeners that the training for implicit bias, the implicit bias program that all of the trustees underwent was a very positive experience and very encouraging experience for all of us. In fact, I took the program home and gave it to all my faculty and residents before we started the match season. So I think we are all very aware of where we need to go with diversity and inclusion in the ABU. Dr. Lee?
Thank you, Drs. Hussman and Terrace. I just wanted to make a quick comment about the capture of race and ethnicity data on applicants for the certification process. I mean, historically, the ABU hasn't captured this data in order to remove any potential for bias, but now we're reconsidering this practice really to allow the ABU to align with other member boards and the ABMS, and also to meet requests from academic institutions who wish to do sound research to examine the experiences that candidates have had throughout the certification process across all racial, ethnic, and gender groups. Really, I mean, the ABU is fully committed to an equitable experience for all candidates for certification, and agree now that it really is in our best interest to collect this kind of data. But of course, we realize that some candidates may feel uncomfortable in providing this information. So the ABU has made the provision of any information on race and ethnicity to be purely voluntary. So I just want to underscore that this is voluntary. Dr. Thrasher, did you want to begin to respond to some of the questions that were submitted ahead of time?
Yeah, thank you. That was excellent presentations from everyone. We do have a series of, in fact, I've got 2 pages of questions. We're very happy that people are so engaged. I've had the opportunity to look through many of these, and I'm going to try to group some of them. Obviously, if you have more specifics, glad to answer them at another time, but so that we can get as much from the chat room, online, as well as on our pre-printed, like to go through a grouping. First, we had 3 questions about how we take care of folks that are slowing down. For instance, I'm doing administrative work, locum tenens work, only involved in specific procedures. We do have a clinically inactive status. If you would like to know more about that, and you are in that administrative position doing specific procedures or locum tenens, we're very willing to give you more information rather than going through that online. We do have that opportunity. I was also asked about how do we entice more people at the later stages of their life to stay in. Interestingly, we're the second oldest specialty. We're second only to cardiothoracic surgery. Interestingly, half of us are over the age of 56, and a third of us are in our 70s and still practicing. So we feel like urology itself has attracted folks into later stages of the career, but it's a good point. We just don't have enough urologists to go around. And we do believe that this clinically inactive status can meet the needs of some of the folks, and I would be willing to give you more information on that if you just contact the office. We had several questions on our continuing certification program. One was, do you have data, actually 2 questions, data about the benefits? Can we show that we're actually have better outcomes with folks that are involved in continuing certification? I think Dr. Joseph addressed some of that. We are going to post online, because we have had multiple questions, a series of number of articles to show that outcomes are actually better for those that are doing continuing certification versus those that are not. They have fewer side effects and fewer lawsuits. So there are over 100 articles in that regard. We're going to post some of those on our website. Not all from urology, obviously, and many from multiple specialties showing that. Additionally, there are questions about, can you explain the value of remaining ABU certified and going into this pilot program? As David mentioned, we have listened to you loud and clear and heard it loud and clear at section meetings, town halls, at the AUA. Everyone has said, you know, we do not want to have pass-fail exams. We agree, and we stopped that years ago. But additionally, we heard you loud and clear about going to testing centers. And if COVID taught us anything, it was that's been a real pain for everyone. And I think this pilot, as we're starting to transition our continuing certification and doing it from the warmth of your own home, on your own computer, with no time constraints, is going to be a big benefit. I will tell you this. One question that continually comes up was addressed in the Vision Commission report. Most people don't know what that is. It's actually published. If you want to look up the Vision Commission report, it's sort of our new roadmap for all boards. Basically, what happened in response to maintenance of certification in 2016 and 17 is that a commission of all stakeholders, meaning hospital administrators, diplomates, over 100 diplomates from all walks of life, were put together to say, what is good about continuing certification and what should we get rid of? To a person of all diplomates that were interviewed, they said, we recognize that there's a difference between initial certification, which is a very high bar, and continuing certification. We recognize we need to stay up with our specialty. We don't want high stakes exams. As I said, that's gone. We do want something that allows us to stay up. We want to have the boards help us identify and close knowledge gaps. I think that's exactly what we're doing here. Do we all believe that there is a benefit to continuing certification? Absolutely. I think that there, not only does that certificate, is it very important for your practice, it's voluntary. We've never said that it should be the one thing that's looked at for certification or for credentialing or licensing. We do say that we feel it's very important. We need to keep a high standard. It protects you as a diplomate, everyone as a diplomate, myself included. Where I practice in Kansas, there are a lot of hospitals that would love to have a urologist. And the good news is board certification will protect that practice and people that are encroaching into what we do for a living. So I do believe that keeping that high standard, and I think that most everyone would agree that closing those gaps and keeping you up with your specialty is important. Every board has recognized that. We do not, on the other hand, say it's mandatory. It's all voluntary. When we asked the question about changes going forward, I did have a number of questions on here about how will this affect me? I just did this. My certificate expires at this time. We really don't know right now. First of all, we're doing a pilot. It has not been accepted yet as a formalized continuing certification program. We hope to have that done in the next year or two. Once we know more, we can tell you more about what that might affect and how it might affect you. We're going to try to limit, very much so, the impact on where the particular certifying person might be in the tenure process. So we're hoping to roll things in as we get approved. We'll know more as the pilot goes forward. So can't answer those questions right now with specifics, but we will let you know that we're doing all we can to limit any impact on you and to make sure that we roll people in appropriately based on where they are in their particular process, the 10-year cycle. We did have a lot of questions about COVID changes. I think there's been sort of a misconception about COVID. First is, if you've been assigned CME, you still have to do that within a year. We're not having folks that you get an extra year to do those. You do it within the year that you're given that remediation. And we're making sure that the offerings there are multiple offerings online. You don't have to go to a meeting to do that. So that is going to benefit you in this pandemic particular situation. So we've got a lot of offerings for you. I will say this, for whatever reason, a lot of questions about, have we just sort of dropped things for a year? No, we've not. We've taken all of these cases on a case-by-case basis. If you're in your last year to recertify, and we finished those exams right now, but if you had been, we are taking those on a case-by-case basis. But what I'll tell you is, if you've got next year to take the examination, take it. We're not going to give an additional year. We're basically saying we don't want the pandemic to punish you. If you didn't feel like you were comfortable sitting for the examination and you wanted to go another year, that was fine, case by case. But again, we haven't given an automatic extra year. We're just basically taking these case by case. We were also asked about retired certificates. I had one gentleman who said that he actually is certified by the ABU, but he's practicing in Canada, wanted to know about retiring. You can retire and get a retired certificate. We've also been asked about reentry. So let me explain retired certificate. If you basically write a letter to the board giving us the date that you plan to retire, no longer see patients at all, you have an active medical license and in good standing with the board, those 4 criteria, then we can issue you a retired status with the date that you state you're no longer going to see patients. What I will tell you is, once you've done that, then to re-enter requires a re-entry pathway. And that's going to be very dependent on how long you were out, how long you were retired, what you did in retirement, et cetera. So you'd have to then repetition the board to see if you could get back into the process. And as I said before, so much of that would require us looking at how long you've been out and what you've been doing. So yes, you can get a retired. It should not affect your practice in Canada. But if you will petition the board for that and give us the dates, we can certainly get your retired certificate. I think that answers both pages of the questions, Roger. So if you have others that have come up in the chat line, I guess we can sort of point those in the right direction. I will say Gary Lamack had 2 about virtual exams. Gary, if you want to address those specifically, or do you think you've covered them?
Sure, I can address them. The one was, it was basically sort of what I covered, how we thought about a virtual examination, and just to put everybody's mind at ease, this is something we've carefully considered over the last 6 months, and the ABU staff, and Charlie and Charlie Hall and Brant have really done a great job at sort of researching this, and I think we're at a point where we feel very comfortable with that, and we will, as I mentioned, we will communicate it. The one thing I will say is, whereas in the CUC, we certainly want you to do that in your house or home. I think in the context of doing the virtual examination, what we're going to have you do and what we're going to suggest is that you do it in a place where you feel as though you have the best and most reliable connectivity. That might be in your home, but for many, it might be in their hospital or practice. And again, we'll go over some of these details with you as we get closer to that time. The only other question I had was on the recertification exam, the LLL exam, and I think somebody asked when the results were going to come back, because many people took it in the earlier fall, and I know it seems like a long time, but just to let you know, we had to put some of those exams off until December because of some problems with the Pearson VUE and getting everybody accommodated. So some of those exams didn't happen until the end or mid-December. But having said all that, we've now scored all the exams, and I believe with any luck, the results will go out by the end of this week, if not by early next week. So you should be getting them very shortly. And I think that's about it. Raj?
Thank you, Gary. David, there is a question about the modular CUC and how it applies to some of the subspecialties. Could you address that, please?
Thanks, Roger. There are several questions, and I should have presented that. The CUC deals with the general certificate. There's a lot of nuances that go into the subspecialty certificate. And I guess as a pediatric urologist, I'll say we have to crawl before we walk. We want to make sure that the CUC process is really going to be something that we can move forward with, because there's a lot of other considerations when we move into the direction of the subspecialty certificates. So for the present time, individuals, diplomats who have and hold a subspecialty certificate, as you come up through your lifelong learning, you will be undertaking the traditional lifelong learning exam.
Thank you, David. I'll ask any of the panelists if they would like to make any further comments, because I don't believe we have any other questions that we haven't addressed at this point. Well, we hope that this has been helpful to you as diplomats. We are doing everything we can to communicate and transmit data to you. Excuse me, we just had a, Brant, this is for you. How can I tell if I've applied but have not been informed whether I've been selected for CUC?
What will happen is that we have, as I said, 500 folks that are going to be allowed. We had to make some last minute adjustments for the year 6 folks, knowing they had extra time, and our 7 and 8s, as David explained, did not. We are right at that threshold right now. So we are going to let everyone know coming forward. Probably this coming week, we'll be able to let folks know where they stand on this and start communicating with them. Right now, we were still gathering our data and figuring out exactly what to do. As David mentioned, we had a huge number, over 720, that hit us in 24 hours. And then after further discussions, we've now adjusted that. And once we get that final tally, the office will be back in touch with those folks. They'll hear it by email, though.
And Brant, the people who don't get selected but were the year 6 people, can you again establish what their priority will be for next year?
Yeah, we're going to make sure that those folks sort of have that first rights of refusal. We'd like to get those in for the next 500. Remembering the pilot will still be 500, variety of reasons. One of which is we're having to update data. A tremendous amount of data will come in. We've had additional servers that have been required to house that data and to crunch that data, and overwhelming everyone, including the office. We want to make sure that we do it the right way. So we will give those people the first right to refusal for the next 500. And if we have to do that another year, another 500, again, the folks that were turned down, we'll try to push them forward and keep them in the queue.
I would just like to add that as of this morning, there were a few open spots for the 7 and 8s. So if you have received the initial email and have not replied and want to, there still might be an opportunity. But that was early this morning, and several hours have passed, and I have no idea if it's now full.
Yeah, it happens. It's changing very quickly. So the people that want to hear something back, it's going to be happening soon.
I'd just like to take this opportunity to thank David Joseph. He has done an unbelievable amount of work to put forward and create this pilot. The ABMS is pretty difficult on these pilots in terms of their stringency of analysis, and David's pilot was pretty much accepted hands down after very little discussion, which is pretty unbelievable. But it just again is reflective of the individual and the integrity of his work, and the amount of labor that was put into really hitting all those little specific things that don't seem like they mean much, but in terms of the various levels of education being tested, in terms of the exposure to articles versus recall, et cetera, all of which are actually tenets of adult education. And this is something that they are getting at. And all of us being adults, we learn differently, especially as the years go by. And one of the ways that has been found to be really very important is repetition of data. And so that's why you'll see this is structured the same. And so again, David, thank you for all you've given to us. Brent, did you want to say something else?
Yeah, I want to say one last thing is that for all the people that are on this call, we do not plan. Now, as we all know, we can't predict what this pandemic will throw at us again. We plan very much to keep the virtual examination we will have this year to a 1 year, a one-off. Our plans are to have in-person exams for a variety of reasons. The most significant is we do believe that in decision-making, judgment, all of the other considerations such as professionalism, having a face-to-face examination has significant benefits. So I just want people to understand that that's what our plan is moving forward, because I've already been asked, okay, do this one time, this will be the way we go forward. Many boards have decided that's not the case. I think we are front and center on that we feel like our future is not in virtual examinations for a variety of reasons, but this will be, our plan is for it to be a one-off.
Seeing no further questions, we'll give you 8 minutes of your day back. Again, thank you from the trustees and the staff of the board. And again, keep in mind that we want to hear from you. I just want to note to you that our staff is always manning the phones and will do everything to communicate to you. And we pride ourselves on that, and we want to make sure that you guys and gals feel like we're being consistent with that, and so that's very important to us. Thank you again for your attendance, and good luck, and stay healthy in this craziness of a world we live in right now. Have a good day, everyone.